guys, and welcome to another Python tutorial. And in this video we will be talking about Python scope. Now after you watch this video, you will be able to know exactly where you can access your variables in Python. Now one thing I must say is that a variable can only be accessed from the region which it was created, and this is the concept of scope, or this is what we call scope. So first I have to write that down by just saying variables can only be accessed, right? Variables can, let me just rub this off. So variables can only be accessed, I hope this is spelling of accessed from the region, right, where it is created. Now this is what we refer to as what? A scope. So this is called scope. Right, this is a C, guys. So this is what we call scope. Now I'll explain to you exactly what I mean by that. Now we have two types of scope. We have the local scope, okay, in Python, and then we have the global scope. Now this local scope simply means that you are creating a variable inside a function, okay, while the global scope means you are creating the variable in the body of code, okay. So in that particular body of Python code, that's where you're creating the variable, right? And I'm just going to label that properly so you know. Now the local scope refers to variables which are created inside functions. So variables created in functions, okay. Remember guys, we've done functions. If you know you didn't watch that video, you can go back or click the link right up and watch the video. So global scope refers to the variables created, the variables created in the Python code, okay, right, in the body of the code. So let me quickly just explain to you what I mean by these two statements. Now supposing I have a function, for instance, and that function, you remember our function always starts with def, and the name of this function is just func, right? And what this function does is it just it has a variable called x, right? And x is simply a name. X is simply a name called John, right? And then what should happen next is we need to just print x, for instance, right? So I may not even write print x here, right? I may come down here and print x, okay, and print x. Now this particular variable right here, this variable right here is a local variable, right? So this is a local variable, so I'm just going to label that, and is a local variable, and this variable is going to be accessible only in this function, okay. It can only be accessible in this function, you get me now? So now on the other hand, right, a global variable, for instance, let's say this is your Python code, okay. So this is your Python code. This is we're going to write our Python code here. So just assume that this is our IDE. Now on the first line we are defining the variable x, right, equals to the name John, for instance, okay. And then we are maybe using the variable down here, okay. So we're using the variable, or even calling a function, or defining a function next, and let's call that function. right? And then on the next line we are just saying x, for example, equals Sam. Okay, now, and then we say print x. Now one thing you must know is that this first instance is a global variable, okay, because it is actually inside the code. It's not embedded in any function. So this is a global variable right here. And don't worry guys, by the time we get to our IDE, you will understand the concept of Python scope better when we do practice. That means this is now the local variable, okay? This is the local variable. Now what is next? What next I want to tell you about is the fact that you can actually use the same name for the variable. So I'll just go to another page and then I'll write a function and show you what I'm talking about. So I can say, for instance, x equals to 1 right here, and over here I'm defining a function, okay? And in that function I'm not going to put anything. I'm just going to say x equals 2, okay? So this is the function, and over here I can come here and just print the value of x. Now note that you are defining a function and we're using x here. We're using x right here, okay? And then we're using x right here, right? And then we're still using the same name for the variable right here. Python treats this x differently. So Python treats this x differently, right? Because it's global, and then treats this differently, and this is going to be the local variable, okay? And these are two different things. Now note that in Python, if I have like x equals to 1 and it's a global variable, right, I can reassign this x, okay? So I can use x again and say x equals to 2 in this same code. Now this is not going to be treated differently. This Python is going to see, as long as it is the same case, you are writing the x in the same case, Python is going to if you do print x, for instance, print x here, Python is simply going to print 2, right? That is what will be printed to console, because you are actually reassigning the value of x and you are saying x now is equals to 2, okay? So variables can actually be reassigned in Python, but in this particular case, in this case right here, okay, in this case you are actually not reassigning, you are declaring a new variable called 2, right? So Python knows that the global is 1 while the local is 2. So this is treated differently as against this. Now let me talk about one more concept before we go to our IDE, and then I would show you exactly what I'm talking about in the IDE. Now the concept is the keyword global, okay? For supposing I have x equals to 1 right here, and then I define a function right here like this, and I am saying x equal 2 right here. Now when I come here and I print x, okay, I'm going to have 1, okay, printed to console. So this is going to print 1 to my console. But if I just come here and put this right here, okay, so if I come here and put global x, for instance, up here, now what will happen is Python is going to see this as my global variable, and then 1 will not be printed to console anymore. Instead 2 is going to be printed into my console, and we will experiment with this in our IDE. So let's quickly open up our IDE. I'm just going to fire up my CMD, go into my desktop where my IDE is, and then I will open code. I'll open code.py, which is the file I've created, and we start talking about this. So I'm just going to clear this. This is from our last class. So I'm just going to go ahead and then I'll just comment Python scope for you here. So I'll comment Python scope. Now after that, I want to start showing you exactly what it's all about. So if I do x equals 1, right, and I come here and I just say print x, okay, and I say print x and I save this, right, I will just fire up my terminal over here, new terminal, and let me just have some space, cd into desktop, and have some more space. Okay, so I'm in my terminal now and I want to run that I want to run this code right now. So python code.py, and I hit the enter key. You see that I have 1 printed out. Now I want to come down here and do something. I'll just create a function, and remember how we create a function, guys. If you haven't seen the video, or you need a refresher, you can go back to watch this. I come back here and I say x equals 2, for instance. If I save this and come back here, okay, now I will still have 1 printed to console. So I'll clear this and then I'll save this, and see, you will see I have 1 printed to console right here. Now having said this, now what I want you to understand is that this right here, I'll comment this, is the global, this x is in the global scope, okay, it's in the global scope, and it's also called a global variable. Why this particular x here is in the local scope, okay, it's in the local scope, and it's called a local variable as well. So if I print x, I'll still get 1, because this local scope right here cannot be accessed by this print statement, okay, it can't be accessed, it's in the local scope, okay. Now how do we make it accessible by this print statement? If we intend to access this local scope variable, we need to make it a global variable by using the global keyword. So if you tell Python that global, and you just say global x and you save this, that means Python now sees this as global variable. But remember, guys, I'm going to save this and then I will run my program once again. But before I run it, spoiler alert, I'm still going to get 1 printed to console. And maybe you can guess why I have 1 being printed to console. It's simple, guys, because if you don't call a function, the function is not going to run automatically, okay. So if I want that function to be executed, I need to first call the function, okay. So if I save this, that means on line 6 this function is going to be executed, and then x will become global. So the local x will become the global x once this function is executed. So if I do print x here on line 7, and then I just clear this and run it once again here, you see that 2 is now printed to console, okay. So this is the concept of a global and a local scope, okay. So these are the 2 kinds of scope you have, and we have also covered naming. You know, in Python, right, if I come here, right, and I say x equals 1, for instance, and I come here and say x equals 2, now remember that Python sees these 2 things as the same variable, in the sense that if I clear this, of course, and I come here, Python is going to give me 2. Why? Because you are actually reassigning the variable on line 2, whereas in the in the scope, when we're talking about scope and you define actually a function here, for instance, and then you define a function here, and then you put a scope and say x equals 2, like we did the last time, okay, and then you know Python is going to treat this x equals 1 and x equals 2 as two different variables, really, okay. So that is exactly what happens in Python. If I come here and print x, it's going to give me 1. If I want it to print 2, I need to use the global keyword, okay. So I hope that you have learned what the global and local scope is all about, and so that you don't make mistake when writing your program. You want to know where you want to put your program, if it's in the local scope or the global scope, so you can easily access those programs. So I thank for watching this video, and in the next video we're going to talk about Python modules, right? Python modules, and we cover a whole lot of things under Python modules. So I'll see you in the next one, guys. Please remember to hit the subscribe button if you are not, and turn on your notifications so you don't miss any videos we upload. Please share, comment, like this video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one, guys.